Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer on the hidden psychological and structural factors that managers actually face when deciding your compensation. If you've ever felt like your year-end bonus was, well, a bit of a mystery, or maybe you wondered why a supposedly objective formula suddenly didn't feel so objective in practice, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating academic study from the Contemporary Accounting Research Journal. We're going to unpack exactly how, and more importantly, why, managers use or totally refuse to use their own discretion to adjust bonuses. So let's start by having you put yourself directly in the shoes of a supervisor facing a pretty massive dilemma. Imagine you've got this top-performing employee, right? They have worked incredibly hard all year long, but then, right at the finish line, their hard-earned bonus is threatened by a completely unforeseen disaster. Something totally 100% out of their control just wrecks their objective performance metrics. What do you actually do? Do you step in and fix it for them, or do you just let the cold, hard formula dictate their pay? It sounds like a super simple question of fairness, but as we're going to see, it is deeply, deeply complex.
All right, Section 1, the bonus dilemma.
To really understand this, we're going to look at a specific hypothetical scenario that researchers use to test real-world managers. Picture this. You manage two division leaders. Let's call them Peachtree and Childers. They both operate in very similar markets, but suddenly, out of nowhere, Peachtree gets hit by a massive, uncontrollable supply chain breakdown. Upper management completely agrees this was a freak event, totally unpreventable, and outside of Peachtree's control. But because of it, Peachtree's division suffers a brutal $212,000 profit loss. To put that into perspective, without that crazy freak event, Peachtree was absolutely crushing it and would have hit over $800,000 in net profit for the year. But because of the disaster, they dropped down to an actual reported profit of $600,000. Meanwhile, your other manager, Childers, who didn't face any supply chain crises at all, cruised to a solid but noticeably lower $400,000 in profit. And here is exactly where the math starts to make things really uncomfortable. Both of these managers have their bonuses calculated at a flat 10% of objective profits. So based strictly on the raw numbers, Peachtree is now looking at a bonus of just $60,000, while Childers gets $40,000. As their supervisor, you're sitting there looking at these numbers, and you have to decide if that is actually fair to Peachtree, who objectively performed incredibly well before disaster struck. Which brings us to Section 2, Fixing Uncontrollable Events. Now, as a supervisor, you aren't just a human calculator, right? You have a major tool at your disposal to fix broken compensation formulas when things go sideways in the real world. You actually have the power to make what's called a discretionary adjustment. Essentially, this is your post-contract decision to step in, alter that objectively determined bonus, and account for these wild, unforeseen events. You can absolutely choose to give Peachtree the money they genuinely would have earned, basically realigning their pay with their actual effort. On the surface, there's this classic business concept known as the controllability principle, and it says you should definitely adjust Peachtree's bonus. This principle basically dictates that employees should only ever be evaluated on what they can actually control. Since Peachtree couldn't control a global supply chain collapse, basic fairness says you make them whole. But here's where the academic accounting research takes a really fascinating turn. The evidence shows that managers actually hesitate to use this discretion, but why? Let's look at Section 3, Setting a Dangerous Precedent. The first major tension preventing managers from fixing these bonuses is the fear of what happens next time. It all boils down to the types of motivation you're creating. If you step in and bail out Peachtree, you motivate what researchers call conventional effort. You're showing the employee the system is fair, which keeps them happy and working hard at their standard day-to-day tasks. But if you don't adjust the bonus, you motivate adaptive effort. Basically, by letting them feel the financial pain of that loss, you're forcing them to craft innovative ways to hedge against future disasters, like, finding backup suppliers or building better safeguards. So think about it. If these uncontrollable events are highly likely to happen again in the future, a manager might intentionally refuse to adjust the bonus. Even though it feels incredibly unfair today, the manager wants to force that employee to adapt and protect the firm against an uncertain future. The data shows it clearly. The higher the likelihood of future events, the less likely a manager is to step in and adjust that bonus. Now, let's complicate things even more. Section 4, the shared bonus pool. What if there's a second tension? One that involves the other manager, Childers, who had absolutely nothing to do with the crisis in the first place. This brilliantly illustrates a huge problem called compensation interdependence. Imagine Peachtree and Childers aren't getting paid out of some bottomless corporate account, but instead, they share a fixed $100,000 bonus pool. If you use your discretion to give Peachtree a full adjustment for their theoretical $800,000 profit, their slice of the pie suddenly expands to $67,000. But because the pool is fixed, that inherently shrinks Childers' slice down to just $33,000. So the manager now faces this brutal zero-sum dilemma. Fixing Peachtree's uncontrollable loss means literally taking money out of the unaffected employee's pocket. You're protecting the victim, sure, but you are directly punishing an innocent bystander to do it. And the research highlights that this specific outcome could completely destroy the unaffected employee's sense of fairness and totally tank their future motivation.
Okay, so what actually happens? Section 5, the experiment results.
To see how real leaders actually navigate this minefield, researchers ran an experiment with 97 MBA students, all of whom had extensive real-world management experience. And what's incredibly interesting here is the massive drop in managers' willingness to adjust the bonus when that pool is shared. The data reveals that the propensity to adjust just falls off a cliff when interdependence is present. When the bonus pool is shared, a manager's concern for the future risk of the event happening again is almost entirely muted by their intense fear of punishing the other employee.
The actual numbers paint a remarkably clear picture. Look at this. When bonuses were individual and the future risks were low, an overwhelming 92% of managers stepped in to help Peachtree. But the very second that pool became shared, even with low future risk, adjustments absolutely plummeted to just 41%. Why? Simply because managers absolutely hated the idea of taking money away from Childers. In their minds, the negative fallout of punishing the innocent bystander loomed way larger than restoring fairness for the employee who actually suffered the freak event.
Finally, let's look at Section 6, the psychology of pay. The researchers realized that it wasn't just the math or the structure of the bonus pool or the likelihood of the event driving these choices. These financial decisions are actually deeply rooted in a manager's own personal psychology. They identified what they call manager fixed effects, meaning if your specific boss personally believes that purely objective compensation plans are the best way to go, they are significantly less likely to help you out when things go wrong. On the flip side, if your manager strictly adheres to that controllability principle we talked about, or if they personally believe that exact compensation accuracy is an attainable goal, they are way more likely to step in and adjust your bonus. So your pay isn't just about the numbers, it's intrinsically tied to the psychological worldview of the person evaluating you. So given that your final payout depends heavily on your manager's psychological traits, their fear of setting a bad precedent, and the structural design of your team's bonus pool, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. How objective is your bonus really? The next time you look at a rigid compensation formula, remember the vast, hidden psychology operating just beneath the surface. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the numbers.